מצוין, בואו נשים את זה פה. Distinguished guests and dear friends, Shalom. About a week ago, life in Israel came to a halt. A barrage of rockets rained down on Israel. Schools were closed, malls stood empty, the local economy temporarily ceased its operations, and the people of Israel gathered around the TV broadcast, which were elevated to emergency format. Thank God, this cycle of violence did not incur casualties, but a sense of panic regarding a matter of utmost national urgency was vividly felt. We must not belittle the danger of rockets, and certainly not the fear in which the residents of southern Israel conduct their lives, day after day, children and adults alike. They are real heroes, and so are our IDF soldiers. Toda Rabat Sal. But here is another thing we must not belittle. On the same day that rockets were launched at South and Central Israel, 887 women across Israel experienced the brunt of domestic violence. 3 women were raped, and 16 women were hospitalized following an assault. How do I know this? Statistics. This is the daily national average. This is happening each and every day. In 2018, 12 Israelis were killed in terrorist attacks. Over the same year, 22 women lost their lives to domestic violence. The number of women assaulted each year in Israel is 324,000. If a rocket launched from Gaza triggers an orange alert that flashes at the corner of our TV screen, imagine how many orange alerts would flash each minute on our screens had an assault on a woman triggered the same alert. If we add to such alerts incidents of verbal abuse, threats, sexual harassment, and technology terror actions, they would cover our screens with flashing alerts all day long. We must ask ourselves, why does a rocket flying from Gaza to Israel scare us more than the national calamity that targets 11% of Israel's women every year? Why does the Palestinian terror put us in a state of national emergency, while the gender terror rarely opens up the news or receives any mention at all in the press? And here is another example of this absurdity. A threat of rockets brings the Israeli market to a halt, costing our economy 2.5 billion shekels per day. With only 2% of this sum, we could eradicate the plague of violence against women altogether. The programs are already drafted. The strategies are known. The government even approved the program's launch. But in practice, the program was successfully intercepted by the Ministry of Finance's Iron Dome. My dear friends, I want to take you for a moment almost 100 years back to 1920. In that year, WIZO was founded as a global Zionist women's organization with branches around the world, including here in Eretz Israel. Another historical event that took place that year was the first democratic election in Israel to the elected assembly of the Jewish population in the country. In that election, full rights to vote and be elected were granted to women in full agreement and with no controversy. This was not obvious. In the United Kingdom, for example, women were granted full voting rights only 8 years afterwards. In France, 24 years later. And in Switzerland, 51 years later. In the following election, held in pre-state Israel in 1925, an all-women party ran and became the 5th largest party out of 25 parties that sought the public's vote. This women's party was formed by a women's organization that later evolved into today's WIZO Israel. I am sharing this with you in order to demonstrate the extent to which the Jewish people and the state of Israel were always pioneers in the issue of women's rights and status. It is my way of showing you how we were the first to understand that in order to build a strong society, women must be made full partners, empowered instead of disadvantaged, favored instead of deprived. We in WIZO have always been here, since those early days to today, to remind, to advocate, to call out when needed, to talk to women and men about women and on behalf of women. WIZO's leadership did this when the British mandate disqualified a woman from legal practice. WIZO's leadership did that when women were underrepresented in the Zionist Council's organs. And WIZO's leadership did that when positions such as mayor were barred for women. What generation of WIZO leaders did, I am doing today, speaking with you here. I feel a sense of urgency and great responsibility. I feel that at this very moment, I am sharing with you the voices of tens of thousands of women, all demanding, stop the terrible violence against women, and give us the tools, yes, yes, yes. Stop it, and give us the tools and power to break out of the cycle of violence in which we are trapped. 167 women were murdered since 2011. Their spilled blood is crying out to us from their graves. It is telling us that if we stand idle, a similar number of innocent women will continue to be murdered every year, and hundreds of thousands of women will continue to be victims of assault and harm. It is important to emphasize that this struggle is not a concern of women only, but a social issue that concerns us all, women and men alike. These are our daughters and granddaughters, our mothers and grandmothers, our sisters, our friends. They are from all sectors of Israeli society. They are managers, teachers, secretaries, scientists, shopkeepers, and more and more. There are also those that shoulder, together with men, the raising and education of the next generation. And most of all, this is about the character of the whole Israeli society. It's just unbearable to think that someone and somewhere out there inside their homes. Hundreds of thousands of women suffer violence and humiliation, afraid to shout out their anguish. They do not always know the right words to convey their needs, and surely often they do not receive an appropriate stage to do so. It is unbearable to see that women are dying of shame and children are forever affected by these sights and voices. The current wave of gender-based violence forces all of us, WIZO included, of course, to take a stand. We're facing a national state of emergency. The next victim is just a matter of time, God forbid, and she could be the nearest and dearest women to you, to us. Our previous goals have been successfully achieved. The first woman lawyer in Israel was granted a work permit and even served in the position I now fill. The first woman mayor in Israel was elected in Rishon LeZion and served later on a WIZO Israel's chairperson. And other women associated with WIZO took leading roles in the Zionist movement as leader of national projects, including Youth Aliyah. On behalf of WIZO, on the eve of our centennial, and on behalf of hundreds of thousands of women in Israel, I call upon public officials and party leaders to place the eradication of violence against women at the top of any new government agenda and include it in any coalition agreement. I thank the Jerusalem Post and the organizers of this event for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. And I pray that this message will be translated into action, and the action into the assimilation of moral and human norms, and making our society safer and stronger for women and men alike, and by women and men alike. Toda rabba. Thank you very much.